Now that our sword is able to deal damage to our enemies, if you've played around and attacked the enemies, you might have noticed that if you simply run into the enemy and get the sword to touch it without actually attacking, you'll still deal damage. And while that might be realistic, if an enemy runs into your sword, it will hurt itself. That's not quite what we want to happen in a game. So we're going to address that by switching our sword script on and off depending on if we are attacking. So to do that, what we're going to do is actually open our player script back up. We haven't seen that in a while, I know. And we're going to start by adding a variable at the top that says public sword. It's important that when you add this variable that you don't give it a capital S, because our class has a capital S. We want to give the variable a lowercase s. What we can then do is say sword is equal to get component in children, which you should remember from our skeleton or from our NPC script. Get component in children sword, open and close parentheses. So now what we want to do is right after that line, we say sword.enabled equals false. What that will do is basically, you remember when we removed our mesh renderer from our sword hurt box, we just unchecked that little box. That's essentially what this is doing in code. It's just unchecking the little box, turning that script off. So what we want to happen is when we issue our attack command, we want this to be set to true. So we'll scroll down in our code down to where we set our trigger to attack for our animation. And what we're actually going to do is call a coroutine. So outside of our update function, you can find the bracket by highlighting one, and it should highlight the other. We want outside of that, we're going to type I enumerator toggle sword and our open and close bracket. And this is what's called a coroutine. So this is a method that allows us to run code that is independent from our update function, but still dependent on time passing. That means that we don't have to track a variable inside update. We can just wait for time to pass inside this and then execute more code. So what we're going to do is fix this first. So you'll see how this is underlined in red. That's always a bad thing. That always means that something isn't working right. Coroutines won't function unless they have what's called a yield in it. So a yield line looks like this. You'll type yield return new, wait for seconds, and then your open and close bracket, and we're going to give it a number of seconds. So I'm going to say 1. So that means that after 1 second passes, the code before this will happen, and then 1 second will pass, and then the code after this will happen. So here we'll say sword.enabled equals true, and then this yield return new will be in between that and sword.enabled equals false. That means that whenever we call this function, sword.enabled sword will be enabled for 1 second, and then after 1 second, it will disable itself. Now to call this, it doesn't work like a normal method where we can just say toggle sword. What we need to do is go up into our input.get mouse button down, and we'll say start coroutine. We'll have our open and close parentheses, and we'll say in quotations, toggle attack, or toggle sword, I'm sorry. And just to double check that that is correct, we'll look and you'll see it there. You can even just highlight this, copy and paste it up into your quotations here to make sure you spelled it right, because again, these things are case sensitive. Now, whenever we click our button, we'll have our sword here able to deal damage for 1 second. And we won't be able to just run into enemies and kill them anymore.